Welcome everyone to the Girlfriend Book Club's monthly discussion. I'm Shelley Emling, the editor of The Girlfriend. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. What? I can't hear you.
Can you start from the beginning? Just because you lagged, you weren't moving the whole time in the beginning.
Really?
Yes, on my end. So if we could just start over real quick. I'm going to pull myself off and just start. I can once I'm gone.
Welcome everyone to the monthly Girlfriend Book Club discussion. I'm Shelley Emling, the editor of The Girlfriend. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. We're so glad to have you with us tonight for our discussion with the author of Hello Beautiful, our August book club pick. As always, the 61,000 members of the Girlfriend Book Club have chosen well. I'm always stunned at what they choose because maybe it's not something I would pick, but as always, this was a great read, Hello Beautiful. So we're so pleased tonight to welcome Anne Napolitano with us to discuss her fabulous new book.
Thank you for having me.
Hi,
and thank you to all the readers for choosing.
So, Anne, I just have to say, before we talk about the book, I saw that Oprah picked this as her 100th book club pick. How was that for you? I saw the interview you guys did and with Gayle King, and it blew me away. I was stunned. You must have been floored. I mean, that's such an honor.
Yeah, there's like levels of shock, and this is whatever the maximum level of shock was, where it had never something. Obviously, I've been following Oprah's book club from the beginning. And the idea that she would ever read a book that I wrote, much less choose it for her book club, much less that I would ever meet her or speak to her, was not anywhere even in my dreams. So when she called me on the phone 5 months before the book came out, it felt like a full body, like adrenalized experience where I couldn't believe that this was happening in any way, shape, or form. And I continue to be like amazed, delighted, shocked. It doesn't really feel real.
So you probably didn't even know that she had read your book, right? Until she
No. And when she called me 5 months before the book came out, and almost no one had read the book because it hadn't, like galleys had not yet been distributed. She had gotten it through like CAA, the film agent for the book. So no, absolutely not. I didn't think anyone was going to call me having read the book. And the last person I thought that would be Oprah Winfrey.
Well, that's such an honor. It just shows how wonderful the book is. So let's talk about the title, Hello Beautiful. Because I don't think a lot of our book club members probably know where the title comes from. Can you tell everybody how you came up with that title for the book?
Sure. When I was little, my mother comes from a large Irish Catholic family, and all of her brothers and sisters lived in New Jersey around where I grew up, except for one of them. Her brother Ed had moved to Chicago to the neighborhood of Pilsen before I was born. And when I was little, he would send me postcards, and the salutation was always "Hello, beautiful." And I knew that he didn't really know what I looked like because he had like 20 million nieces and nephews, and I hardly ever saw him. But I felt like as a kid that he was seeing that I was beautiful on the inside. And I felt like as a very shy, very bookish child, that if I had any beauty, it was on the inside. And it always made me feel really wonderful. And when I was writing this book, it occurred to me, well, it's set in Pilsen, this neighborhood in Chicago where my uncle lived and still lives. And because it became this like magical land to me that I got these postcards from, and where there are murals all over the walls. And it occurred to me while I was writing that the father in the book, the father of the 4 Padavano sisters, that is how he would, Charlie, that's how he would greet his daughters. And that greeting would have the same kind of similar impact on them that it had on me.
So does your uncle know that it had that impact on you?
Well, of course, my uncle doesn't just say that to me. Not little did I know, obviously, at the age of 7 or whatever, but he says it to almost everybody. And now he knows. And I'm sure he's bemused, and he says he's pleased. So I hope so.
So the book is based, it centers on 4 sisters who often compared themselves in the book to the March sisters in Little Women. So was that on purpose? Was Little Women a book that you loved growing up?
Yeah, I did. I mean, it was one of the many books that I absolutely loved, that I consider to be like foundational pieces of my being because of how young I was when I read it. But I actually did not, I didn't do this intentionally. I didn't set out to write an homage to Little Women. I didn't even think of Little Women until like 80 pages into writing the book, when I was writing a scene about the four sisters and they started arguing over which March sister they were.
Oh,
And
okay.
I was like, oh, of course, because like when I was a kid, I was like, I'm Joe, or like with my other friends who read, you would think about which sister you were. And
Yeah.
so when the sisters did that in the book, I was like, oh, of course there are four sisters, and
Right.
of course they're going to argue about this. And then I was like, oh, Laurie was this lonely boy on the outside in Little Women, and William was this lonely
Yes.
boy on the outside in Hello Beautiful. So once I saw it, I was like, oh, that makes sense. And I, was very pleased to sort of like reference it throughout the book, but it wasn't something that I set out to do.
So where did you come up with where did the impetus for the whole idea for the book come from? It sounds like you didn't really know how it was all going to play out when you started the book. Is that right?
No,
Was
I
it
never
out?
know.
No?
Yeah. No, I do. For the first 9 months, when after I have an idea, I spend like 9 months basically thinking, researching, and taking notes. I don't let myself write what I call pretty sentences during that period, because it makes me use like the analytical part of my brain, which is a part of my brain I can't use when I'm writing a scene. Um, when I write a scene, or like when I'm writing what I call pretty sentences, like a character will walk in and say something I didn't expect, and something will happen that I didn't know was going to happen, which is wonderful. It's like the act of discovery, like being a reader. But I found that it's most helpful if I can combine some like thought and planning with that method. So, but during those 9 months, I figured out like 4 or 5 things that I knew were going to happen in the book,
Hmm.
but they all were spread out at these very large distances. I guess I can't give anything away because everyone's read the book in theory.
But
Is it? Should I be spoiler safe? I should be spoiler safe. Okay.
probably.
Yeah, so that's fine.
But big things
so
happen in the book. Big things happen.
I knew a really good, so the book spans from 1960 to 2008, and I knew a big thing that was going to happen in 2008 before I started writing the book, but I
Right.
didn't know how I was going to get there. And I knew like two things that were going to happen in the first half of the book, but there's a great quote by the writer E.L. Doctorow about writing novels, that it's like driving home on a foggy night. So you can only see as far as the end of your headlights, but that's
Right.
enough to get you home. You see a little bit, and you see a little bit, and you see a little bit. So the fact that I had knew like four things, and then I just had to figure out how to get from the first one to the second one, and I did that by following, the headlights and being like, okay, I think this is going to happen. But there's an obsession that leads me into every book, like some kind of strong interest. And for this book, it was basketball. It was the history of basketball. I
Really?
had, yeah,
You were obsessed with the history of basketball?
yes. I
Okay.
spent a few years before I started writing this book reading like every nonfiction book about basketball that exists. And it started because I was interested in the history of the social justice movement in our country.
Right.
And I stumbled into the fact that the history of basketball in our country really runs in parallel slash overlaps with the civil rights movement in our country. It has major figures like Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I could not read enough. It's so strange because I grew up playing soccer. My
Yeah.
children play soccer. It doesn't make sense, but I knew that basketball was going to play a role in this book, and I knew that the young man who starts the book, William, was going to be a lonely little boy dribbling a basketball. And I didn't know, and I knew somehow there was going to be some like basketball history in it as well. So that was like another thing that led me into this book.
Wow. So, what of all the characters in the book, was there one that was particularly challenging to write? Was it Sylvie or Julia or William or Kent or the mother? I mean, whoever. Was there one that was a little bit harder to get your head around than the other characters?
Yeah, Julia was the most challenging for me. I think that I share DNA with all of the characters except for Julia and Rose. And that
Oh,
doesn't mean I don't love them, like I do. And it doesn't mean I don't empathize with them. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that I don't feel like I'm in them or that they're in me, whereas I do for all the other characters. And where that really becomes difficult, where it specifically is difficult, is in moments of great change for that character. So during really intense emotional moments in the novel, where Julia is changing in the same way that Sylvie changes and William change,
Yeah.
I was able to track William and Sylvie's changes much more easily because I could feel it inside my own heartbeat, like how I might grow and evolve or which way I would lean. But for Julia, I had to write those moments over and over again, being like, is this true? Is this true? Is this how she would feel? It just took me, it was much more laborious than it was with the other ones because I didn't have the instincts that I had for the other characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So this isn't giving too much away, I don't think, but it focuses somewhat on mental health, mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondered, did you have to research that quite a bit, or was that intentional on your part to make sure you highlighted that in some way, the importance of mental health?
It wasn't intentional. I did do research. I don't think really it's giving away to be like it's William Waters because he starts the book. There's a tragedy in his family, right. And that sets him up for a childhood in which his parents are really unable to love him the way that they should. And I needed to find out if going through a childhood like that, if he ever could be quote unquote okay. And I didn't know whether he could or not. So what I wanted to do was to follow him as truthfully as I felt like I could, step by step. And I knew there would be ramifications to that kind of growing up. And it was important to me that I portray those truthfully and accurately and in a way that felt emotionally true. So that was, that's what led me through it. And I did do research and, but I also just think that depression is just it's part of being human. We all know at least, one person, probably more than one person who has gone through depressive episodes in their life or absolutely struggled with mental health. So I want to show our full humanity, and there's no way to, excise that and show our full humanity.
Right. So how long did it take you to write this book? I know you've written 3 other books, I believe, before this one. What's your writing process like from the time you think of the idea till carry us through? How long does that whole process take?
Sure. This was the fastest book I've wrote the most quickly. My 2 books prior to this took 8 years each. Okay. But yeah. And I wrote Hello Beautiful in 2 years. And
it's fast. Yeah.
There are a couple reasons for that. But one is that the 9-month period that I talked about where I don't let myself write pretty sentences, where I think and research and take notes, that 9 months elapsed in April 2020. So we were at the very beginning of the pandemic, and I live in Brooklyn, and we were really on lockdown. And the same month my father died. And because of the timing of the pandemic, we weren't able to be with him while he was dying. And then we weren't able to gather when he died, which happened to so many people during that period of time. And what that meant was that when I started writing, I was like, I felt emotionally unstitched because the world just seemed to be in this situation that made no sense to anybody. And we did not know what was going to happen next. There was so much fear and uncertainty. And then I had just gone through this incredibly isolating experience of losing someone so important to you and not being able to be with the people that loved him. And so I tore into this book, and I felt like I was writing the book that I emotionally needed to be inside. Mm-hmm. And so there was an intensity to the writing experience this time that I haven't had, during my other books. And I really just think that's just coincidental to when I started in the period of time that I wrote it during. But I really felt like I was healing myself as well as William.
So the book is centered on grief and the importance of true love. I mean, what would you like the readers out there to have taken away from this novel?
Well, I never want to like presume what anyone's, reading experience should be. I guess that what I hope is that people finish it feeling like it's never too late to reach out to the person that you lost, whether it was, 30 years ago or, 2 days. Um, that connection really is deeply, deeply important. And it's also never too late to, reach out for the person that you want to be. That
Right.
there's always, that we always can make a new decision. We're surrounded by choices. We can just walk in the different direction that seems to be more nurturing to ourselves and our life, and to connect with the people around us.
So I know in these last remaining minutes that our audience wants to know a little bit about your background. Did you always want to be a writer, or how did you stumble into this amazing career of yours?
um, it was a very slow stumble. I decided I wanted to be a writer in fourth grade. When you get one of those vocabulary assignments that everybody got, where you get like 10 words to put into sentences. And on this one time in fourth grade, the teacher said, I want you guys to put them into sentences, but the sentences need to connect. So, like, to form a little scene or a paragraph, basically, that all makes sense together. And so I went home to do the assignment, and I did it. And I looked up at the clock, and I thought it had taken me like 5 minutes. And I saw that it had taken me 45 minutes. And it like blew my mind, because as a child, the only time I'd ever had time disappear like that was during play. And I was like, oh, this is magic. Like, this is magic stuff. And so, like, I started writing a novel the next day, which of course I wrote like 6 pages, like I was in fourth grade. But and then it was much slower after that, obviously. I was very shy. I came to believe, like, in high school and college, that maybe I would just write for myself and, like, and go into publishing or something that was writing adjacent. And I went to college and majored in literature and minored in fiction writing. And then I got sick during college with a virus called Epstein-Barr,
Oh, yes.
which just meant, yeah, so I was sick for 3 years, and it took me an extra year to finish college. And it really changed my life, because I was like, okay, I only had like 2 hours of energy a day. So I had to figure out what nurtured me, to what was I going to spend those 2 hours on. And immediately I was like writing, and my boyfriend, because I was 20 years old. And so that was what I focused on. Yeah, exactly. But I also was like, what, like, life can change on a dime. I never, it was like getting hit by a bus, being like, well, I didn't think I could be hit by a bus, but I was. And I was like, I want to live the life that I want to live. And if I fail, then at least it will be my failure. And so I went to graduate school for fiction writing. I wrote 2 novels while I was in my 20s that didn't sell. The first one didn't get an agent. The second one, I got an agent, but it wasn't bought to be published. And then my first novel, which was really my third novel, was published in my early 30s. But the next 2 novels, the first one and the second one, were well reviewed, but not very widely read at all. And I didn't actually think that I would be published again. And then I wrote Dear Edward, and it became a Jenna Book Club pick. And that's when most people think that was my first novel. So it was a slow journey, but it is like who I am and what I love to do. And I'm so grateful each time that I get to do it again.
So I know Dear Edward was made into an Apple TV series that I think ended in March of 2023. It was with Connie Britton, I believe. So how did it feel to get one of your books made into a TV series? Because there's often like bites. There's often like somebody buys the rights to it and they're going to make it. But it's rare, to me anyway, that it comes to fruition, that it actually turns into a TV series or a movie. So
it's like miraculous. It's miraculous, basically. And there's so many hoops that have to be gone through for any kind of creative property to to be on a screen, whether it's a movie or a TV screen. So many places where it can fall apart. So many places that require different kind of funding, etc. And so I'm still filled with amazement that. And I felt so lucky, and I feel so lucky. I met with Jason Katims, who's he created and wrote Friday Night Lights and Parenthood. He's an amazing writer. Friday Night Lights is one of my favorite shows ever. And he wanted to make it into a show. And I was like, absolutely, please do whatever you want. And because it was him really is why it got made, because he had deals in place where, you know, whatever he wanted to do could happen. So it really didn't have anything to do with Dear Edward. And I just felt lucky that he was going to reimagine the world that I created into his own world, which is what he did. And I feel really, really lucky.
So what are you working on now? Everyone wants to know.
I am working on another novel. I finished the 9-month planning, thinking, researching period in the beginning of June. So I'm still very early in the writing. I probably have like 30 pages, and I'm feeling my way through it. The obsession that led me into this one is trees. I read The Overstory by Richard Powers last summer,
Okay.
and that blew my mind. And he talks about contemporary writers needing to write about the diversity of our world, not just including the diversity of humans, which is really important, but the actual world that we are living in, and telling the stories of all of this intertwined, because we are all intertwined, and as a necessary way to raise the consciousness of humans so that hopefully we can go on being humans on this planet. So I want to try and do that, but like in my own like heart-led storytelling way.
That sounds amazing. I can't wait.
I hope so.
So I also wanted to ask you just like 2 or 3 more questions real quick. I mean, what authors inspire you? You just said that the book that inspired you last summer, but is there something you're reading right now? Are there authors that you read on a regular basis, you know, all their works? I'm just curious as to who inspires you.
Yeah, I'm reading so much right now. I think where I am in my own creative process, sort of when I get really deep into my own novel, it's actually hard for me to take in other fictional worlds. But because I'm at the very beginning of mine, I'm craving fictional worlds. So I'm reading a few books a week at the moment, which is really fast for me. And right now I'm listening to a book called In Memoriam by Alice Wynne, which is a gay love story set in World War I. It was the Good Morning America buzz pick or whatever. It's really wonderful.
I haven't read that one yet, but I have heard about it. I heard it's
yeah. And I've become a big fan recently of R.F. Kuang, who wrote Yellowface and also wrote a really spectacular novel called Babel that came out a couple of years ago. She is terrifically talented. So I'm very excited to follow her career. The careers that sort of started me on mine would be Ann Patchett. I read her from the very beginning and felt like, maybe for a simpler reason as she was named Anne, that like maybe I could do this and maybe I could figure out a way to tell stories in a way that was gripping or compelling and yet quiet. John Irving also was another huge influence on me when I was growing up. The sort of like big world storytelling. And yeah, I mean, in the last few months, I read The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honoré Jeffers, who's a magnificent writer. I've read the Covenant of Water, the new Oprah pick by Abraham Verghese, I was so happy to be in that world for quite a long time because it's so long. I really could go on and on. I am in a very big, wonderful, like reading moment. I'm so grateful.
So 2 more questions. I forgot to ask you earlier if you have sisters of your own. I'm sorry, I forgot.
No, that's all right. I do. I have a sister and a brother, but my best friend growing up, her name was Leah, and I slept at her house like half of the time. And her mother has 5 sisters, and they all had slightly different versions of the same face. And they would walk in and out of her house at all hours as if it was their own, and they would pick up conversations in the middle. And these 5 sisters seemed more themselves when they were together than they did separately. And I used to watch them like they were a TV show when I was a kid. So it was really that sisterhood that I wanted to try to write my way into the magic of that kind of bond. Right. It was them that I was thinking of when I was writing the Padavano sisters.
Wow. And finally, I always ask this question of every author. The Girlfriend is all about the power of female friendship. So I always like to ask authors, what do you love to do with your female friends? Do you go away on
Aw.
girls' trips? Do you do something on the weekends with them? I mean, what do you love to do with your girlfriends?
That's a great question. I love to I love like having dinner with one of my best girlfriends and talking, both of us talking nonstop for 3 hours because there's no awkward silences. We want to hear everything about each other's lives, and we have such total support and empathy for each other that you're in complete comfort about sharing every inch of your experience because you know that you're not only in a safe place, but you're in a place where that person is seeing the best possible version of you. And it's both relaxing and inspiring and nurturing at the same time. There is nothing better.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And the book, if you haven't read it, but I think most of you have, Hello, Beautiful. Tell your friends. It's an amazing read. I read it last week, and as I told the author, I absolutely loved it. So, Hello, Beautiful. So thank you so much, Anne. For those of you in the book club, please stay online because I'll be posting some conversation starters this evening so that you can talk about what you loved about the book and share your own opinions about it. So thanks again. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you, Anne, for joining us so much.
Thank you so much.